positive aspect of this relationship between social and non-social cognition. Holyoke and Gordon didn't know anything about social neuroscience when they were writing in 1984, but you might begin to think about neuroscience as reflecting a third culture in this interplay of fields where people whose primary focus is on the brain and the rest of the nervous system and the rest of biology, for that matter, are also engaged in this process of cultural exchange. Sometimes neuroscience is deriving its methods and its principles and its concepts directly from psychology or other aspects of cognitive science. At other times, neuroscience says, hey, look, you look at the brain, you learn something new. That's a negotiation here. But now we've got 3 points. Engaged in interaction, not just social and non-social cognition, but we've got cognitive and social neuroscience as well. And again, in the same way that each culture can kind of temporarily dominate, right now I think we're looking at a kind of struggle for dominance involving cognitive neuroscience. Is neuroscience going to be the queen of the behavioral sciences, or the king of the behavioral sciences, that will succeed in a program to kind of reduce all the other sciences, all the other behavioral sciences, to the principles of brain function? That's a goal for some neuroscientists. I can name names if you wanted, but I won't. Paul and Patricia Churchland, Steve Stitch, people like that, and we'll see kind of how that works out over the years. Okay. John Searle makes the very interesting point that one of the reasons that we have this kind of interaction between these 2 kinds of sciences is that we've got 2 different kinds of reality which are trying to be understood by 2 different kinds of sciences. The first kind of reality is what Searle calls an intrinsic reality, the properties of things and the mechanics by which they interact with each other that would be true even if there was nobody there to observe them. Intrinsic facts about the world, which Searle argues are the proper subject of the natural sciences like physics and chemistry and biology and cosmology and so on. And then there's this other kind of reality, which is this personal and social reality that is what it is only because there are people in it. Social reality, personal reality that is what it is only because there are observers who create that particular reality. And Searle argues that it's that observer-dependent reality, the reality of people interacting, of societies interacting, of political campaigns, of economic laws, things like that, the reality of history, that is the proper subject of the social sciences. And here I think you have another take on the 2 cultures problem. Do the natural sciences and the social sciences constitute 2 cultures that don't really talk to each other very much? When they do interact, do they have all sorts of problematic relations, problems of dominance or whatever? That's something I think is just something for us to understand in the future. Okay. The last point to be made, I think, is that social cognition can serve as a basis for creating a kind of cognitive point of view in social science generally. It's pretty clear to me, anyway, that social cognition provides the theoretical concepts for social neuroscience. I'm not so much interested in connecting things down at the moment, but it seems to me that the study of social cognition forms a basis for infusing the other social sciences with what might be called the cognitive point of view, a point of view that is focused on problems of knowledge and knowing and perception and all of that. It's not my idea, it's Mark Turner's idea. Turner's a Berkeley PhD, worked with George Lakoff, who points out that the kinds of things that social sciences are interested in are all cognitive kinds of things. The social sciences, this is Searle's point as well, are really fundamentally concerned with problems of meaning. They're interested in how people reason. They're interested in how people make choices or how societies make choices. They're interested in how individuals and groups categorize the world. Social sciences are not interested in so much interested in biological evolution as they are in cultural evolution. Cultural evolution, the transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next, and the way that knowledge changes from one generation to the next. And they're also interested in cultural differences, which are essentially differences in knowledge and belief. These are all topics about cognition, all topics that have to do with knowledge and knowing. And so what you might begin to think about is how the perspective of social cognition could serve as a basis for a kind of cognitive revolution, not just in psychology, that's over, we had that, but a cognitive revolution in the other social sciences as well. To get sociologists to think about the cognitive basis of group interactions, for example, or social structure, to get historians to think about intergroup conflict as conflicts about ideas, to think about historical change as in terms of changes in belief. So it seems to me that in the final analysis, what we got to do is just kind of think about this. In order to understand social cognition, we have to understand not just what goes on inside the individual. Okay, we're trying to link psychology and cognitive science to other kinds of things. So in social cognition, the individual is trying to understand the social world, but the individual is not separate from that social world. He or she is part and parcel of that social world. So if we're going to understand how the individual thinks, we also have to understand how those social forces play out in that individual's life. And I think that's not just a job for psychology. That's a job that enrolls all of the social sciences, sociology and anthropology and political science and history and economics and all the other social sciences as well, which suggests that it really might be time for the social sciences to become more closely involved in the project of cognitive science, for example, and it's a time for the cognitive point of view to kind of get involved with some of these other social sciences. Okay, so social cognition is not just the embedding of the knowing of people inside a science of how we know things generally. I think that the study of social cognition really is the first step towards that thoroughly cognitive social science that people like Mark Turner and, for that matter, George Lakoff talk about. Because what we have to understand is that cognition in all its forms, cognition in general, but especially social cognition, is not just a matter of individual minds knowing the world. So there's a social context for social cognition, which reflects the fact that in social cognition, there are individual minds working together to know the world. And for that matter, trying to understand a reality that is, at least in large part, the products of their own minds working together. So through individual and collective cognitive processes, we try to understand the world in which we find ourselves. But one of the things we understand is that we're simultaneously making the world in which we find ourselves, making the world we're trying to understand. There's a lot more to social cognition than that, but that's the end of the semester, so that's all we can do. Thank you very much. You've been a really nice class. I've enjoyed this. I hope you have as well. And for For those of you who are not graduating, don't be strangers, okay? And for those of you who are, have a wonderful life, okay? Thanks very much. We'll see you next Wednesday for the review session and the Tuesday thereafter for the final exam.